My parents said Santa Claus only gives gifts to the grandchildren who are truly loved by their grandparents. Then all the grandkids received presents except my daughter. I forced a smile, put her coat on, and drove away. 1 week later, the Christmas lights twinkled mockingly as I watched my 7-year-old daughter, Ruby's face crumble. Around us, my nieces and nephews tore through wrapping paper with squeals of delight, while Ruby stood empty-handed beside the towering Douglas fir in my parents' living room. Santa must have forgotten me, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. My mother, Patricia, smoothed her silk blouse and smiled serenely from her wingback chair. Oh, sweetie, didn't you hear what Grandpa and I explained earlier? Santa Claus only gives gifts to the grandchildren who are truly loved by their grandparents. The room fell silent. My sister Margaret's 3 children froze mid-unwarp. My brother Keith's twins exchanged confused glances, but the damage was already done. Ruby's brown eyes filled with tears. You don't love me. We never said that, darling, my father Gerald interjected smoothly, not looking up from his newspaper. Santa makes his own decisions. I felt something snap inside me, but I kept my expression neutral. 8 years of being the disappointment had taught me that much. I was the daughter who chose teaching over law school, who married a mechanic instead of a banker, who lived in a modest ranch house instead of the gated community where my siblings had settled. Come on, Ruby, I said quietly, reaching for her coat. We should get going. But Mom, now, sweetheart. Margaret blocked my path as I headed toward the door. Amber, don't be dramatic. Mom and Dad probably just forgot to grab her gift from upstairs. Right, Mom? Patricia sipped her wine. There is no gift upstairs, Margaret. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Even Keith looked uncomfortable, and he usually backed our parents on everything. You actually did this on purpose. My voice came out steadier than I felt. We thought it might motivate you, my father said, folding his paper with crisp precision. You're raising Ruby to have low expectations. Perhaps this will inspire you both to aim higher. Ruby started crying in earnest. I buttoned her coat with shaking hands, grabbed our things, and walked out into the December cold. Behind us, I heard Margaret's voice rise in what sounded like protest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The drive home took 20 minutes. Ruby cried for 18 of them. Why don't Grandma and Grandpa love me? She asked as we pulled into our driveway. They do love you. They're just confused right now. The lie tasted bitter. My husband Jake met us at the door. One look at our faces told him everything. He scooped Ruby up and carried her inside while I stood in the garage letting the cold seep into my bones. I needed to feel something other than rage. The text messages started an hour later. Margaret, that was harsh, but you know how they are. Keith, maybe try talking to them after the holidays. Distant cousins who'd heard through the grapevine. Sorry about what happened, but I'm sure they meant well. Nobody condemned what my parents had done. They simply accepted it as another quirk of Patricia and Gerald Morrison, the community pillars, who'd built a real estate empire from nothing and expected the same drive from everyone around them. I deleted every message. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of anger and protective instincts I didn't know I possessed. Ruby became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped talking about school, stopped asking to invite friends over, stopped being the bubbly child who sang in the shower, and made up elaborate stories about her stuffed animals. Jake tried everything. He brought home her favorite ice cream, suggested movie nights, even offered to let her stay up past bedtime. Nothing worked. Ruby had internalized the message my parents had sent. She wasn't worthy of love. On the 3rd night, I found her sitting in her closet surrounded by drawings she'd made for my parents over the years. Birthday cards with wobbly letters spelling I love you, Grandma and Grandpa. Crayon portraits of family gatherings. A ceramic handprint she'd painted at school, specifically as a Christmas gift for them, now unwrapped and forgotten in her desk drawer. Ruby, sweetie, what are you doing? She looked up at me with hollow eyes. I was trying to remember if I did something wrong, if I was bad, and that's why Santa didn't bring me anything. I sank down beside her among the scattered papers. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. This is about grown-ups making terrible choices, not about you. But Grandpa said Santa only brings presents to grandchildren who are truly loved. So either Santa doesn't know I'm good, or Grandma and Grandpa don't love me. Which one is it, Mom? How do you explain cruelty to a 7-year-old? How do you tell your child that the people who should protect her decided to use her as a pawn to control you? Sometimes adults say and do things that are wrong, really truly wrong. And what your grandparents did was wrong. It wasn't about you or Santa or love. It was about them trying to hurt me by hurting you. And that's something I will never forgive. Ruby picked at the edge of one drawing. Are we going to see them again? Not for a long time. Maybe never. I haven't decided yet. Good. The word came out small but firm. I don't want to see people who think hurting kids is okay. My daughter at 7 years old had more emotional clarity than my parents ever would. That night, after Ruby finally fell asleep, clutching her worn, stuffed elephant, I sat at the kitchen table with Jake. He'd made tea, though neither of us was drinking it. "What are you thinking?" he asked carefully. "I'm thinking I'm done." Done how? Done pretending their cruelty is okay. Done making excuses. Done exposing Ruby to people who would humiliate her to prove a point. Jake reached across the table and took my hand. "What do you need? Time, space? And maybe a lawyer." His eyebrows shot up. "A lawyer. My grandmother left me something. Do you remember when she died, 3 years ago? There was a trust. The one your parents are managing. Managing, controlling, whatever you want to call it. Grandma Rose was specific in her will. The money was supposed to come to me when I turned 30. I turned 30 last March, and every time I ask about it, Dad says there are complications with the paperwork. He's an attorney. There are no complications. There's only obstruction." Jake squeezed my fingers. "Go to war if you need to. I've got your back." Over the next week, I started documenting everything. I found the original copy of Grandma Rose's will that she'd given me before she died, tucked away in a fireproof box in our bedroom closet. I printed out every email exchange I'd had with my father regarding the trust over the past 9 months. I gathered bank statements showing that Margaret and Keith had both received their trust distributions on schedule. The pattern was undeniable. My parents had released funds to the children who met their expectations and withheld them from the one who didn't. It was financial manipulation dressed up as legal procedure. I also started calling relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunt Linda, my mother's younger sister, who'd moved to Oregon after her own falling out with my parents. Second cousins who drifted away from family gatherings. Old family friends who'd known my grandmother. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle. Grandma Rose had apparently talked about her concerns regarding how my parents treated me. She told Aunt Linda explicitly that she was worried they would try to control or withhold my inheritance. "Your grandmother was sharp as a tack until the end," Aunt Linda said during one late-night phone call. "She knew exactly what she was doing when she set up those trusts. She told me once that you were the only grandchild who reminded her of herself, independent, unimpressed by money and status. She wanted you to have security that couldn't be taken away." Did she say anything about my parents trying to block it? She said she'd done everything legally possible to prevent interference. But Amber, your father is a skilled attorney. If anyone could find loopholes, it would be him. Then I need to be smarter. "Do you have a lawyer yet?" "Meeting with one tomorrow." "Good. And Amber, I'm proud of you for fighting back. I should have done the same thing years ago." The meeting with Nathan went even better than I'd hoped. He reviewed every document with meticulous attention, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. "This is airtight," he said, finally tapping the copy of the will. "Your grandmother knew what she was doing. The trust was supposed to vest completely when you turned 30. There's no provision for your father to continue managing it after that date. No conditions you needed to meet. Nothing. The money should have been transferred to you in March." So what do? We send a formal demand letter. We give him 7 days to transfer the funds in full, including any interest or growth. If he doesn't comply, we file a petition with the probate court for breach of fiduciary duty. How strong is our case? Nathan leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Amber, this isn't just strong. This is a slam dunk. Your father has violated his legal obligations as trustee. If this goes to court, he could be forced to pay penalties on top of the original amount. He could even lose his law license if the Bar Association decides to investigate." Something fierce and bright bloomed in my chest. How soon can we start? I can have the demand letter drafted by tomorrow. Do it! The next morning, I woke up feeling more purposeful than I had in years. Ruby seemed lighter too, as though my determination had somehow transferred to her. She ate breakfast without prompting and actually smiled when Jake made pancakes in the shape of dinosaurs. "Are we still not going to Grandma and Grandpa's house?" she asked between bites. "That's right. Forever." "Maybe. We'll see." She nodded, satisfied. "Can we go to the library today? I want to get books about space." "Absolutely." At the library, Ruby lost herself in the children's section while I sat nearby answering emails from Nathan on my phone. He'd already drafted the demand letter and wanted my approval before sending it via certified mail. The language was formal and uncompromising. It laid out the terms of the trust, the date when it should have vested the amount owed, and the legal consequences of continued noncompliance. Reading it felt like holding a loaded weapon. "Send it," I typed back. The reply came immediately. "Done. It'll arrive at his office tomorrow. I felt a twinge of something, guilt or fear, I wasn't sure. But then I remembered Ruby's face on Christmas, the way her hope had crumbled into confusion and then pain. The guilt evaporated. Ruby emerged from the stacks carrying an armload of books about planets, astronauts, and black holes. Did you know that some stars are so big they could fit 1,000,000 Earths inside them? I did not know that. It's true. And when they die, they explode and make new elements. Isn't that cool? They die, but they make stuff that becomes other things. I looked at my daughter, her face bright with wonder, and thought about how children understand transformation in ways adults forget. Something had to die for something new to be born. That's very cool, sweetheart. Very cool indeed. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. I kept my phone close, expecting my father to call the moment he received the demand letter, but there was only silence. Then Margaret called. I let it ring twice before answering. What do you want, Margaret? What I want is to know what you were thinking sending Dad legal threats. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for him? Humiliating. You want to talk about humiliation? Your parents deliberately excluded my daughter from Christmas to punish me. They withheld money that legally belongs to me. And you're worried about Dad's feelings. He's trying to protect you from yourself, Amber. That money was supposed to help you build a better life, not enable you to stay stuck in mediocrity. The words hit like a slap. Mediocrity, that's what you think my life is. Look at where you are. You're 30 years old, teaching elementary school, married to a mechanic, living in a house that probably costs less than my guest cottage. Yes, Amber, it's mediocre. Dad was trying to motivate you to want more. I have everything I want. A job I love, a husband who respects me, a daughter who is kind and curious and wonderful. The only thing I don't have is parents who accept me as I am. And you know what, I'm fine with that trade. You're being incredibly selfish. This affects the whole family. No, Margaret. This affects my family. Me, Jake, and Ruby. The rest of you are peripheral. And if my standing up for myself makes things uncomfortable for you, that's something you'll have to work out on your own. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from liberation. Jake found me standing in the kitchen staring at my phone. That sounded intense. Margaret thinks I'm ruining the family by demanding what's legally mine. The family ruined itself when your parents decided to use a child as a bargaining chip. He pulled me into a hug. You're doing the right thing. Am I? What if this makes everything worse? What if Ruby asks about them someday and blames me for keeping them apart? Then we'll explain exactly what happened and let her decide how she feels. But Amber, you're protecting her from people who've already proven they'll hurt her to get to you. That's not wrong. That's parenting. His words settled something inside me. I wasn't destroying a family. I was protecting mine. The following day brought a response from my father, but not the one I expected. Instead of calling or emailing, he sent his own attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Victoria, who showed up at my workplace during my lunch break. Mrs. Porter, she said, as I exited the school building. I'm Victoria Westbrook, representing Gerald Morrison. I'd like to discuss the trust matter with you. I have an attorney. Any discussion should go through him. I understand, but perhaps we can resolve this amicably without involving the courts. Your father is prepared to offer a settlement. The settlement I want is the full amount I'm owed plus interest. That's not negotiable. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Your father is concerned that you may not understand the full implications of pursuing legal action. He's respected in this community. Challenging him publicly could have consequences for your career, your reputation. The threat hung in the air between us. I took a breath, keeping my voice level. Are you suggesting my father would retaliate against me professionally if I pursue what's legally mine? I'm suggesting that litigation is messy and public. People talk. Schools are sensitive about controversy. Then I guess my father should have thought about that before he violated his fiduciary duty as trustee. Tell him he has 5 days left to comply with the demand letter. After that, Nathan files with the court, and whatever happens is on him. I walked away before Victoria could respond, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Inside the school, I locked myself in the faculty bathroom and let the adrenaline shake through me. They were trying to intimidate me, to make me back down through fear rather than compliance. It was such a perfectly Morrison family tactic: never admit wrong, never yield, simply escalate until the opposition crumbles. But I wasn't crumbling, not anymore. Walk me through the trust, Nathan said, pen poised over his legal pad. I explained how my grandmother, my father's mother, had established individual trusts for each of her grandchildren. Margaret and Keith's had been released on schedule. Mine hadn't. How much are we talking about? Nathan asked. The original amount was $50,000. With growth over the years, probably closer to $80,000 now. Nathan whistled low. And your father is the trustee. Was. According to the terms Grandma showed me before she died, his role as trustee ended when I turned 30. After that, the money should have transferred directly to me. Do you have documentation? I have copies of everything. Grandma made sure of that. She told me once that she knew my parents saw me as the weak link in the family. She wanted me to have security they couldn't take away. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was the only one who ever thought I was enough exactly as I am. We spent the next 2 hours building a case. Nathan requested all relevant documents, drafted letters, and prepared to file a formal complaint if my father didn't release the funds immediately. But there was more. You said your parents run a real estate business, Nathan asked. Morrison Properties. They own rental units all over the county. I'm going to look into their business practices too. If they're willing to illegally withhold your inheritance, they might be cutting other corners. I hadn't considered that angle, but something about it felt right. My parents had always operated as though normal rules didn't apply to them. Christmas Day arrived. I told my parents we wouldn't be coming to any more family gatherings, and I'd said it via text so there could be no confusion. Margaret called 6 times. I didn't answer. Keith sent a long message about how I was being unreasonable and hurting the whole family with my selfishness. Instead, Jake, Ruby, and I spent the day volunteering at the community shelter. Ruby helped serve meals to families who had nothing, and something in her seemed to settle. She wasn't the only kid who felt unwanted, but here she mattered. I like helping people, she said on the drive home. It feels good. It does, doesn't it? Grandma and Grandpa never help people like this, do they? No, baby, they don't. She was quiet for a moment. I don't think I want to see them anymore. Mom, is that okay? My heart broke and healed at the same time. That's completely okay. The letter from Nathan Briggs arrived at my parents' house on January 2nd. I know, because Margaret called within an hour, her voice shrill with panic. What have you done? Dad is furious. He says you're suing the family. I'm claiming what's legally mine. There's a difference. Over money. You're destroying this family over money. No, Margaret. They destroyed our relationship when they deliberately humiliated my daughter to punish me for not living up to their standards. The money is just me taking back what Grandma wanted me to have. You're being vindictive. I'm being clear. Tell Dad he has 1 week to release the trust funds or Nathan files with the court. And Margaret, I meant what I said. We're not coming to family events anymore. Ruby deserves better than people who use love as a bargaining chip. I hung up before she could respond. 3 days later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. That evening, however, a certified check arrived via courier. $83.12. No note, no apology, just the money he should have given me months ago. Jake and I stared at the check on our kitchen counter. That's not the end, though, is it? He asked. Not even close. Nathan called the following Monday with news. I've been digging into Morrison Properties like I mentioned. Your parents have some serious problems. Multiple fair housing complaints that were settled quietly, reports of substandard living conditions in their low-income units, and something interesting about their property taxes. How interesting? Interesting enough that I've referred the information to the appropriate authorities. If what I'm seeing is accurate, your parents have been underreporting income for years. A cold wave of satisfaction washed over me. What happens now? Now we wait. But Amber, this could get ugly. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I thought about Ruby's tear-stained face, about 28 years of being told I wasn't good enough, about my grandmother's gentle hands and her whispered promise that I deserved more. I've never been more sure of anything. The waiting period that followed was excruciating. Every day I expected some new form of retaliation from my parents, but instead there was only silence. Margaret stopped calling. Keith stopped texting. Even the extended family seemed to fade into the background. Ruby, meanwhile, started to bloom. Without the pressure of upcoming family gatherings and the constant implicit message that she wasn't quite good enough, she became more confident. She tried out for the school play and got a part as a talking tree. She joined the art club. She made friends with a new girl in her class whose parents had recently divorced and who understood what it felt like when families fell apart. Zoe's mom is really nice, Ruby told me one afternoon. She said I could come over this weekend. Can I? Of course. Zoe doesn't see her dad much anymore. She says it's because he wasn't nice to her mom. Is that why we don't see Grandma and Grandpa? Because they weren't nice. I chose my words carefully. Partly, but also because they weren't nice to you. And I won't let anyone hurt you, not even family. Ruby processed this information with the seriousness of someone much older. That's good. I think parents should protect their kids even if it's hard. I think so too, sweetie. She went back to her homework, and I sat there marveling at her resilience. Children were remarkable creatures capable of healing from wounds that would shatter adults as long as they had someone fighting for them. January brought bitter cold and the first real development in the case. Nathan called me at work, his voice tight with barely controlled excitement. The county auditor's office is launching a formal investigation into Morrison properties. They found discrepancies in the tax assessments for at least 12 properties. What does that mean? It means your father has likely been undervaluing his properties to pay less tax. If they can prove it was intentional, he's looking at substantial fines, back payments, and possible criminal charges. My stomach flipped. Criminal charges. Tax fraud is serious, Amber. I didn't create this situation. I just pointed the authorities toward information that was already public record. They're the ones who decided it warranted investigation. But you knew what you were doing when you sent them that information. Yes, Nathan admitted. I did. And I'm not sorry. Your father has built his wealth by cutting corners and exploiting loopholes. Someone should have called him on it years ago. Do you want me to back off? Did I? The question sat heavy in my chest. Criminal charges felt extreme. Felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Then I remembered Christmas, remembered Ruby's face, remembered my mother's serene smile as she explained that Santa only gave gifts to children who were truly loved. No, I said quietly, I don't want you to back off. Whatever happens, he earned it through his own choices. Okay, then I'll keep you updated. After hanging up, I sat in my empty classroom and let the weight of what I'd set in motion settle over me. There was no going back now. The machinery of justice, slow and grinding as it was, had begun to turn. My parents would face consequences for their actions, real consequences that went far beyond family drama. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me felt powerful. Mostly I felt tired. That evening, Jake made dinner while I helped Ruby with her math homework. Normal domestic life, the kind my parents had always dismissed as beneath their notice. But sitting at our kitchen table, watching my daughter's tongue stick out slightly as she concentrated on fractions, I felt richer than I ever had in my parents' formal dining room. Mom, Ruby said, looking up from her worksheet, "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa miss us?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know, honey. Maybe." "I don't miss them. Is that bad?" "No, sweetheart. It's honest." She nodded and went back to her fractions satisfied. Children were remarkable in their ability to move forward once they felt safe. Ruby had already processed what happened and made her peace with it. I was the one still carrying the weight. Jake caught my eye across the kitchen and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure it was true. February arrived with an unexpected twist. Aunt Linda called to tell me she'd heard through family channels that my parents were planning to countersue me for defamation and emotional distress. "It's complete garbage," she said. "They're just trying to scare you into dropping the trust claim. Don't let them." "How would they even argue defamation? I haven't said anything publicly." "They're claiming you've been spreading lies about them to relatives and that Nathan's investigation was based on false information you provided. Like I said, garbage. But Gerald's connected enough that he might find a sympathetic judge." My hand started shaking. "So what do I do?" "You document everything. You make sure Nathan has copies of all your communications, and you don't back down." Amber. I've known your parents my whole life. They're bullies. They're only dangerous if you let them intimidate you. After we hung up, I forwarded Linda's warning to Nathan. His response came within minutes. "Let them sue. Discovery will force them to produce financial records they don't want public. They're bluffing." I hoped he was right. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal maneuvering. My parents did file a countersuit, just as Linda had warned. Nathan filed a motion to dismiss it as frivolous. The county investigation into Morrison properties expanded to include potential fair housing violations. Local news outlets started sniffing around the story. By February, the county had launched a formal review of Morrison properties. By March, local news outlets had picked up the story. My father's face appeared on the evening news, stone-faced and furious, as reporters shouted questions about housing violations and tax fraud. Margaret stopped calling. Keith sent one final text calling me a traitor and telling me I was no longer his sister. I blocked his number without responding. My mother tried a different approach. She showed up at my house on a Saturday morning in April, dressed impeccably, as always, carrying a wrapped present. I opened the door but didn't invite her inside. "This is for Ruby," Patricia said, holding out the gift. "A very late Christmas present." "No. Amber, please, you've made your point. Can't we move past this?" "Move past what exactly?" "The fact that you and Dad used my child to hurt me. The fact that you stole from me. The fact that your entire business is built on exploiting people who can't fight back. Those accusations are baseless. Your father's lawyers will prove that. Then he has nothing to worry about. Patricia's composure cracked slightly. You're going to destroy everything we've built. Decades of work gone because you can't take a joke. Calling it a joke doesn't make it one, Mom. And I'm not destroying anything. I'm just refusing to protect you from the consequences of your own choices anymore. So that's it, you're cutting us off completely. You cut Ruby off first. You just didn't expect me to do anything about it. I closed the door. Through the window, I watched my mother stand on the porch for a long moment before finally walking back to her car, still clutching the unwrapped present. Ruby appeared beside me. Was that Grandma? Yes. Did you let her in? No, sweetheart, I didn't. Ruby slipped her hand into mine. Good. The legal proceedings dragged through spring and into summer. Morrison Properties faced substantial fines for housing violations. The tax investigation resulted in penalties and back payments that hit my parents' finances hard. They were forced to sell several properties to cover their debts. Margaret's husband left her in June. Apparently, he'd only been interested in the Morrison family money, and with that drying up, so did his commitment. She sent me a long, rambling email blaming me for her divorce. I deleted it without finishing. Keith lost his job at Morrison Properties when they had to downsize. He'd spent years coasting on nepotism rather than developing actual skills. The job market wasn't kind to him. I felt no guilt. They'd all stood by while my daughter was humiliated. They'd all benefited from my parents' shady business practices without asking questions. They'd all treated me like I was less than them because I'd chosen happiness over status. In August, I used part of the trust money to take Ruby on her first real vacation. We spent a week at the beach building sandcastles and collecting shells. She laughed more in those 7 days than she had in the entire previous year. Mom, she said on our last night, as we watched the sunset from our hotel balcony, are you sad about Grandma and Grandpa? Sometimes, but mostly I'm proud of us. Why? Because we chose to be kind instead of cruel. We chose to be brave instead of convenient. Those aren't easy choices, but they're the right ones. She leaned against me, her hair smelling like salt and sunscreen. I'm glad we left. Me too, baby, me too. By September, my parents had put their large house on the market. The real estate empire had crumbled, and they couldn't maintain the lifestyle they'd built. They moved to a modest condo across town, the kind of place they'd once sneered at. I heard through the family grapevine, though. Family now meant distant cousins. And Aunt Linda, who had reached out to apologize for not speaking up at Christmas, she'd been horrified by what happened to Ruby but hadn't known what to say. I understood. Standing up to Patricia and Gerald Morrison had never been easy. Do you think they've learned anything? Linda asked over coffee one afternoon. I don't know, but that's not my problem anymore. You seem lighter, she observed. Happier. I am. Cutting out toxicity makes room for better things. And there were better things. I got a promotion at work. Ruby joined the local theater program and discovered she loved performing. Jake and I started taking cooking classes together on Friday nights. Our life wasn't fancy or impressive by my parents' standards, but it was ours, and it was good. In October, Margaret reached out with what I assumed would be another attack. Instead, her email was different. I've been in therapy, she wrote. My therapist asked me to examine why I've always competed with you for Mom and Dad's approval, why I stood by when they hurt you and Ruby. I don't have good answers yet, but I'm starting to see patterns I don't like. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a relationship. I just wanted you to know that you were right about all of it. I'm sorry it took me losing everything to see it. I read the email 3 times before responding. I appreciate you sharing that. I hope therapy helps you find peace. Maybe someday we can talk, but I'm not ready yet. Take care of yourself. Her response came immediately. I understand. Thank you for not slamming the door completely. That's more grace than I deserve. November arrived with cold winds and early darkness. 1 year since the Christmas disaster, Ruby had grown 3 inches and gained a confidence I'd never seen before. She no longer asked about her grandparents. When kids at school talked about their grandparents, she mentioned Jake's parents who'd stepped in with unconditional love and acceptance. They're my real grandparents, she told me matter-of-factly. The other ones were just practice versions that didn't work out. I'd never been prouder of my child's resilience. The week before Thanksgiving, a letter arrived from my father. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter on his expensive stationery. I debated throwing it away unopened, but curiosity won. Amber, it began. No dear, no warmth, pure Gerald Morrison efficiency. Your mother and I are relocating to Arizona. The business is dissolved and we see no reason to remain here. I'm writing because your mother insists I should apologize for the incident with Ruby at Christmas. I acknowledge that the situation was handled poorly and caused unnecessary distress. However, you must understand that our actions were motivated by concern for your development, not malice. The subsequent legal troubles you initiated have cost us everything we spent 40 years building. I hope you're satisfied with your revenge. Despite everything, we remain your parents. The door is open should you choose to repair this relationship. Gerald Morrison. I read it twice, looking for actual remorse, any hint of understanding. Finding none, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd show it to Ruby as an example of how not to apologize, or maybe I'd simply forget about it entirely. Jake found me in the kitchen later, staring out the window at our small backyard where Ruby was teaching the neighbor's dog new tricks. "You okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "They're moving to Arizona. How do you feel about that?" "Relieved mostly, like closing a chapter I should have ended years ago." "Any regrets?" I watched Ruby laugh as the dog performed a perfect spin, just that I didn't protect her from them sooner. "You protected her when it mattered. That's what counts." Thanksgiving came and we hosted dinner for the first time. Jake's parents, Aunt Linda and her family, a few close friends, and Nathan Briggs with his wife. Our small dining room overflowed with conversation and laughter. Ruby said grace, thanking everyone for being her family, the real kind that loved people without conditions. There were no designer table settings or expensive wines, no undercurrents of judgment or competition, just people who genuinely cared about each other sharing a meal and making memories. After dinner, as we cleared dishes, Jake's mother Carol pulled me aside. "I know this year has been difficult, honey, but looking at you now, you seem free, like you finally stepped out of a shadow." "That's exactly what it feels like." She hugged me tightly. "Your daughter is lucky to have a mother brave enough to choose her well-being over family obligation." Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Ruby was asleep, I found myself reflecting on the past 11 months. I'd lost my parents, 2 siblings, and the extended family that came with them. But I'd gained something more valuable: self-respect. The knowledge that I would always protect my daughter, even when it cost me everything. The trust money sat mostly untouched in a college fund for Ruby. Some had gone to legal fees and our beach vacation, but the rest was building interest, a gift from the one person in my father's family who truly loved me. Christmas approached again, bringing with it complicated feelings. Ruby no longer feared the holiday, but I carried memories of last year like old bruises tender when pressed. "Can we have Christmas here again?" Ruby asked in early December, with Jake's parents and Aunt Linda, maybe some friends from school. "That sounds perfect." "And Mom, can we volunteer at the shelter again on Christmas Day?" "Absolutely." She grinned. "Cool, because I told some kids at school about it and they want to come too. Is that okay?" My heart swelled. More than okay. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Christmas morning arrived clear and cold. Our tree wasn't as grand as the one in my parents' old house, but it was ours, decorated with handmade ornaments and twinkling lights Ruby had carefully arranged. Presents spilled out beneath it, each one chosen with thought and love. Ruby opened her gifts with genuine joy, exclaiming over books and art supplies and the telescope she'd been hoping for. Nobody kept score. Nobody compared. Nobody suggested she didn't deserve what she received. At the shelter that afternoon, Ruby organized the other kids into teams. They served food, played games with children who'd come in with their struggling parents, and spread more kindness in 3 hours than my parents had managed in decades. Watching her, I finally let go of the last threads of anger I'd been carrying. Patricia and Gerald Morrison had taught me one valuable lesson, though not the one they'd intended. The best revenge wasn't elaborate or cruel. It wasn't humiliating them in public. It wasn't watching their business crumble. The best revenge was building a better life than they could imagine and raising a daughter who understood that love wasn't transactional. On the drive home, Ruby dozed in the back seat while Jake held my hand across the console. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Completely." "Any regrets about how everything went down?" I thought about my father's non-apology letter, about the crumbled real estate empire, about Margaret's divorce and Keith's unemployment. I thought about Christmas 1 year ago, when I'd forced a smile, put Ruby's coat on, and driven away from toxicity disguised as family. Not even one, I said. Not even one. The road ahead stretched into evening darkness, but our little car was warm and full of people who loved each other without conditions. Behind us lay the wreckage of relationships built on judgment and conditional approval. Ahead lay possibility and peace. Ruby stirred in her sleep, murmuring something that sounded like "love you." "Love you too, baby," I whispered back. "More than you'll ever know." And I meant it. Every word, every sacrifice, every difficult choice that had led us here to this moment of quiet contentment. This was what family should feel like, what love should look like, what I'd fought for and won. Not through revenge, but through refusing to accept anything less than what we deserved. 1 year after they'd broken my daughter's heart, I'd given her something far more valuable than any present under a tree. Proof that she was worth fighting for, always. The Morrison family legacy of cruelty ended with me. In its place, I built something better, something real. Something that would last long after Christmas lights came down and another year began. That was my revenge. Living well, loving freely, and never looking back.